Hey, it's Alex from BoardGameCo, and it's time for another Shelfie Saturday, which won't actually be every Saturday, and may not be on Saturday in general, but I did one of these videos before, and I got a bunch of requests to do another one, but this is a video where I talk about the various games on my shelves behind me, and specifically the ones that have stayed, specifically the ones that have earned some form of longevity, and why. Now, some of these games I've talked about in other videos in other contexts, but in general, I'll just be picking a handful, slowly going through them, and we'll see how it plays out. I hope you enjoy, and let's hop to shelf number one. So on shelf number one over here, we're going to talk about two games, and the first one is City of Spies, which I think was in my top 20 of all time. I don't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was. But City of Spies is an excellent game that the cover doesn't really do it justice. The cover makes you, the cover and the name, it's called City of Spies, Estoril in 1942. If you were trying to think of a worse, more esoteric, less useful name for a game, this is it. I'd say it needs a retheme, but I actually really like the theme. It's just kind of the name that throws you off, and the art actually kind of grows on me, although it didn't really do it for me initially. And this got a Dice Tower Seal of Excellence, and I would say this was the game that made me start paying attention to the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. Don't get me wrong, I like a lot of the games that Tom Vasel and Dice Tower do, but I also don't like a lot, and sadly the Seal of Excellence has been 50-50 for me, so basically not that helpful, but this and Sheriff of Nottingham are on point. Maybe we'll do Sheriff of Nottingham, we'll see. I'll get around to the shelves in a second. In any case, in City of Spies, the basic idea of the game is you have these areas over here that you are going to be trying to put your spies down on, and most of these spies will go face down. Most of the spies will be going face down so that your opponents don't actually know what you put. But there's a minimal enough of a variation that this isn't blind bluffing. There's a degree of accountability or risk assessment or knowledge that means you are constantly trying to figure out what your opponents did, and additionally, most of the spots, I'd say a majority of the spots on the board, actually give you opportunities to peek at other people's face down cards. And they have this interplay of abilities that will kill other spies, pull other spies into other areas, swap the reward card being given. They have a bunch of abilities, and the sequencing in which they play out is supremely important to basically establishing dominance, to being able to take control of the board, earn the most spies, and win this game. This game has a combination of tactical planning, trying to account for multiple if this or that, what about this, and how will this play out. It gives you the opportunity to feel clever, not only as you destroy your opponent's plans, but as you come up with your own plans that no one anticipated. Someone locks in the perfect amount of strength to perfectly dominate a territory, and using, I can't remember the name of it, but using the romantic one, I can't remember what it's called, but using romantic one or whatever it is, you suck that person, that spy, into another territory, and suddenly they can't do anything what they wanted to. There are so many opportunities to manipulate the abilities of the tiles, the abilities of your spies, and through that manipulation, through that tactical do this or that, or slip this into that, or kill that spy before this, it gives you opportunities to feel clever. And it does all of that in roughly an hour to an hour and a half generally. I like this game best with 3, still good with 4, although if I'm playing with 4, I'd rather just play Battle for Rokugan. I think Battle for Rokugan gives a similar experience, not the same, but similar, and plays better with 4 and 5, versus City of Spies is better with 3, at least for me and my group. But that's City of Spies. From there, let's talk about, let's see what we got here. Let's do one of these ones. Okay, Sylvion. Let's talk about Sylvion. Sylvion is one of my favorites from the Oniverse. Okay, Sylvion is a game that, it might be my favorite, I don't know. I think Cassian I still like most, but it's close. Sylvion is part of the Oniverse, which effectively means this is a solo / two-player game, and really, ideally with solo. I mean, you could play it two-player, but I do recommend it significantly more with solo. And this is a game that, it's kind of a tower defense mechanism going on. You have cards, you're not going to be able to see much from the back of this box over here, but you have cards that you are effectively playing out to stop the fire from taking over the forest. So you're going to be playing fountains of water to stop the fire. You're going to be playing trees that will give you points and allow you to, well, get points and win the game. But you have to stop the fire from hitting those trees and ravaging all the things you spend time building up. The game, and like many Oniverse games, the game starts you off with a simple tutorial that kind of makes you feel like, huh, this is interesting. I don't feel the need to like love this game, but it's interesting. And then you ramp it up a notch and you're like, oh wow, this is really interesting. There's actually a lot of decisions to be made in this game. And then you take it up to the 3rd level and you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? How did he not only make an incredibly masterful puzzle of how to best protect my forest, but he also managed to break it up into bite-sized chunks of how to learn the game, each one presenting an increasing level of complexity and thus reward as you feel like you're slowly mastering the game. This is one that I really need to pull out more often. I'd say that's mostly true for all of the Oniverse games. I like them a lot. I'm a big fan of them. I really need to get these to the table, and I really like Sylvion. From there, let's talk about, I don't want to move too much, I'm trying to pick games in my general vicinity over here. Let's talk about Spirit Island, which I don't know, actually. I'm gonna hold off on that one because I don't know if I talked about it last time. So let's talk about Tribune, okay? I don't think we talked about Tribune last time. I should really take a note of the various games I talked about last time when I did this video, because the goal isn't to be repetitive, the goal is to talk about different games. Tribune is a game that just had a reprint on Kickstarter, a reprint that sadly I did not back, nor had any interest in backing. While they were adding some gameplay mechanics or another faction that, of course, I want more stuff, the art of the board was so distasteful to me personally, and I recognize that everything is a matter of taste, that I had no interest in the game. And distasteful is a strong word. What I should really say is it was dry and didn't pull me in, versus the artwork on regular Tribune does everything to pull me in. I mean, look at that board. I don't know how well that, maybe it's just I like it. I often find when you like something already, like even Castles of Burgundy is a game that initially I didn't love the art. I was like, this is a terrible artwork game. But then I grew to love it over time, and eventually when they came out with the reprint, I was like, no, I don't want the reprint. But now I have the reprint, and the reprint's fine too. So maybe it's fine, I don't know. But I like the original, and I felt no need to pay a decent amount of money to upgrade on, well, what wasn't an upgrade for me. I digress. That is not talking about Tribune at all. Tribune is one of my favorite worker placement games. In Tribune, what you are doing is, there's areas of faction control, worker placement, some bidding. There's a lot of different things that work together fairly well to deliver a fairly robust experience. And that experience, it starts off with you basically placing your workers each round to get various cards that are going to be a key part of dominating the various factions. And then from there, the places you're going to put your workers are a fewfold. You're going to place your workers to get more cards. You're going to place your workers to actually attempt to wrest control of various factions. You're going to place your workers in various locations that will allow you to bid or counterbid your opponents. You'll place your workers in the catacombs to get a selection of other people's cards while also adding money to the catacombs, which might help you if you're the gladiator faction or if you can wrest control of the gladiator faction, which is a lot of information for someone who didn't play the game. I understand that. But ultimately what it comes down to is, in the second phase of the game, as you slowly resolve your workers, you're going to try to attempt to take control of factions through either having more cards of a given faction or through having higher value cards of a given faction. And you know, as you take control of each faction, it is unlikely you will maintain control throughout the game. And that's not the point, because you are rewarded for having gotten control at any point of a faction, and that is very helpful. Now, don't get me wrong, when you take control of a faction, you'll get a benefit, and every round that you hold control of a faction, you'll get a benefit, so you're still incentivized to hold on to these factions as long as you possibly can, not just for your own success, but to thwart your opponents who will, at some point in some way, want to take control. There are a lot of different interweaving parts in the way these factions play out, and the game is won through a variety of endgame objectives that you have to achieve different ones, and it varies in the way it plays out because there's different cards. Some of these will be essential, mandatory ways to win. Others will be optional, but then you can choose. Do you want to get 30 money? Do you want to get 4 faction markers? Do you want to have 10 victory point markers? You have to achieve a certain number of these objectives, but not all of them. And that really allows you to have the opportunity to develop a plan of action that is customized and different every single game. My one request, I have the expansion. I'm actually not a huge fan of the expansion. I like the assassin cards, and that's basically it. But my one request is I wish they had more victory conditions or more interplay in the way you can achieve different ones, because at the end of the day, despite the level of variety in this game, it does tend to feel a bit samey, but not unrewarding. Meaning, even though it is a bit samey, even though it doesn't really have that much to mix up the experience, even those varied victory conditions don't really make the game feel different. They do adjust the strategy to an extent, but they don't make the gameplay feel that different. That being said, despite feeling samey, the interplay of each opponent, the interplay of yourself and others trying to min-max how you can, that's not really min-max in a Euro style, but trying to figure out where you need to spend money to achieve dominance. It is a tremendous worker placement game. This is one of those games where I wonder why the rating isn't as high as, in my opinion, it should be. Obviously, my opinion is my opinion, and, you know, aggregate ratings are a thing. But for me, Tribune knocks it out of the park on all boxes. For my group, it has generally been just a well-loved game, and I highly recommend Tribune. From there, let's move to another shelf. From there, let's talk about Skull. Skull is a game that has made me basically, I mean, I still have it, but I basically have almost gotten rid of Coup because of Skull. Now, Coup, let's talk about both these games, actually. So let's start with Coup because Skull took over. So Coup is a game that, it's a classic bluffing game. This is just pure straight bluffing, in which in this game you're going to take different, there are different characters you can have in the game. There's like 5 or 6 standard, more through expansions, more through different content. But in Coup, you have 2 face-down characters, at least initially, and what you're going to do is you're going to say, I am this character and I'm doing this ability. So for example, the most basic one would be, I am the Duke and I am taking 3 money. At which point, you might be telling the truth or you might be lying because you can say whatever you want. But another player can say, you're not the Duke, I challenge you. In which case, if you are the Duke, they will lose one of their 2 lives. But if you're not the Duke, you'll lose one of your 2 lives. And so it ends up this fascinating interplay in which you are constantly trying to bluff in order to... The benefit of this game is not in the bluffing. The benefit of this game is that when you are lying, you have access to all the abilities. And having access to all the abilities will basically help you win the game. The problem is you only have access to all the abilities through lying. If you tell the truth, you only have access to the abilities you actually have, which might be a huge limiting factor in this game, which incentivizes you to lie, but picking when and where to lie is the key to this game. Lying too much will get you caught out because people will realize quickly, and just a matter of odds alone, you'll be caught out. Picking when to lie, especially one of the characters is an assassin, and when you're an assassin, you get to say, I'm killing you, because I'm the assassin. At which point they are more incentivized to call your bluff anyways, because they might die. Although it's a little more complicated than that because of the nature of 2 lives. People who play this game know what I'm talking about, but either way. The point is that it does allow for a lot of bluffing and lying in a very controlled, very short game. A game of Coup lasts 5 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes is on the long end, and you have to do a lot in that time. It is very satisfying to play, and the amount of interaction they have with only a handful of abilities, a handful of cards, really makes bluffing in this game fun. I like Coup a lot, and there's a reason it's still on my shelf, even though, let's talk about Skull. So Skull is a game that was recommended by Shut Up and Sit Down, and I mean, recommended by a bunch of people, but I saw it from Shut Up and Sit Down, and if you've listened to my podcast with, our podcast with Quackalope, whose shirt I'm wearing, again, by the way, if you listen to our podcast with Quackalope, then you already know that while I really like Shut Up and Sit Down as an entertainment channel, I don't actually align with them on most games. Skull would be one of the exceptions in which I totally align with their tastes. Skull is a bluffing game that, while it has less of the nuance and complexity that Coup offers, that's also why I think I prefer it. Meaning, Coup is a great game to get to the table with people who know Coup. But you kind of have to get 3 or 4 games under your belt before you can even really have a chance of playing on a level playing field. Because if I know the characters instinctively, if I know that the Contessa counters the assassin without having to think, then I am at an advantage in Coup, because while I can just say, this, with a straight face, with a dry, I know the characters, it's easy, it's quick, it's done, you might stutter or pause as you try to remember which role counters which. So again, Coup is a great game, I highly recommend it, but it's not as simple to pull out when you just have 20 minutes and you want to introduce someone to a new bluffing game. So Coup's great, but I think Coup is better for people who know Coup. Again, don't get me wrong, barrier to entry here is minimal. You're talking about like 4-5 minute games before you start picking up the flow. But nonetheless, when you're trying to teach someone a quick, appealing bluffing game, and it's their first time, that can be enough to make me pick up Skull instead. Skull is a game where it also is a quick and simple bluffing game, but all you have to do at this point is you have one game in which you are literally teaching people the rules in that one game. And there's still nuance in the game, but the nuance in the game is more from the aspect of learning how and when to lie, not trying to memorize new characters while you learn how and when to lie. And that can be a big difference. It can make it so that you need 2 games of Skull before you're already looped in, or even 1 game, depending on if you've played lying games at all in the past. But in Skull, all you have is coasters. I mean, you could really just go to a bar, draw in a bunch of coasters, and play this game. But what you do is one of your coasters has a skull in it, and the rest have flowers. And you are slowly playing out these coasters one at a time, escalating the piles of coasters in front, until someone starts a bid. And they start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then someone wins with 5. Now, what does it mean to win? It means that you now have to pick up 5 coasters from all the players, starting with all of your own. So if I have 2 coasters in front of me, I have to start with my 2, and then I can pick up 3 others from the other players in any order of my choice. Which means you don't want to win a bid, because it's the part I didn't tell you yet, you don't want to win a bid if you have a skull in your pile, because if you reveal a skull, yours or an opponent's, you lose, and you lost one of your 2 lives. Versus if you, that's not true, you lose one of your coasters, which is one of your 4 lives. But if you win, then you win one of the 2 times you need to win this game. So you want to often start bids when you have a skull in your pile, hoping that you won't win, but the person has to wonder, did he want to win that bid? He looked like, I mean, he went to 4, that's a pretty aggressive number, but maybe he knew I was going to go to 5. There was a lot of mental gymnastics of trying to throw off your opponents through how and when you bid. And it's just a ton of fun. This is a game that I want to say it plays best with 4. I found 5 and 6. 6 was way too chaotic. 5 was a little more chaotic than I like. And 3 just has a little bit enough. I think it's best with 4, but good with 3 and 4. And 5. Good with 5 still. But Skull is great. It literally teaches in the process of a game. You just start playing and you're like, okay, great, now watch. I'll do this, I'll do this. It's taught in 5 minutes. The first game is a wash as they learn how and when to lie. And then from there, it's just madness and fun. So, from there, let's talk about, let's see, Acquire. Acquire is a great game. Acquire is, I believe, the oldest game in my collection, and in many gamers' collections, often this will be the oldest game. Not always, there's lots and lots of gamers, and everyone's a different special snowflake, I understand. But when you see these questions pop up on forum threads, what is the oldest game in your collection? I would argue Acquire is the most commonly picked answer. I'm not saying it's 50%, I'm not even saying it's 20%, but it is the most commonly picked answer, at least from what I've seen. And why is that? It's because Acquire is the game Monopoly should have been, which is great time for a little tangent of, you often see the question, why do gamers hate Monopoly? Now, I can't answer for everyone, but I can answer for myself. I don't hate Monopoly at all. I just think Monopoly is not to my taste. But imagine, pick your hobby. Let's say it's movies. Now pick whatever hobby you prefer. And imagine for a second that something completely mediocre in your hobby is the face of your hobby. So pick a completely mediocre movie. I can't even think. What's a mediocre movie? I don't know. The first Star Wars movie, Phantom Menace. Imagine every time someone said, oh, you like movies? I guess you like the Phantom Menace. That'd be a little distasteful, right? It's not that the Phantom Menace is that bad. I mean, I know Star Wars, but the Star Wars movies weren't that bad, but they just weren't that good either, at least the first few. I don't want to get into a digression of a tangent here, but the point is that Monopoly's not terrible, and no one hates Monopoly. It's just not fun that it's the face of our hobby when it's so mediocre. But Acquire is an older game, meaning it's been around for long enough that it could have been what Monopoly is, and it's a financially based game that actually has a ton of strategy. This was by Sid Saxon, I believe. I don't see the name. It's by Avalon. I'm pretty sure it's Sid Saxon. Let's see if I can find the name quickly. A Sid Saxon game, yes. In Acquire, what you're doing is you are trying to acquire stocks and shares in hotel chains. And as those hotel chains merge, it is so much fun to watch the game play out, because initially you're just slowly building up a hotel. Initially it's all about what you're building, and maybe an opponent will jump in and do their thing over here and this and that, but slowly but surely hotels will start to merge, and that is when things get crazy, because your ownership shares in hotels will shift. Do you want to sell your stocks in a hotel that just merged and try to build up a better chain elsewhere? Do you want to try to acquire stock in the new hotel, the new giant merged hotel, because I mean it's a bigger piece of the pie now, and maybe that will continue to grow? And the interplay of, I've been using the word interplay a few times this video, but the interplay of the way different characters will have their different objectives, to me this is the quintessential merging and stock taking game or whatever. I mean, Indonesia, which is somewhere on my shelf here, I think does it better, but it also had 40 years to figure out a better formula. So Acquire is so good for a game of its time that it's still in my collection, although I'll grant I haven't played it in too long of a time. But I do need to get this game to the table. It is so much fun to pull this out. It's fairly simple to teach. There's definite luck in it. There's definite luck of which tiles you draw. But unlike Monopoly, where I don't want to get into Monopoly, Acquire has a ton of strategy based around, yes, what also is the luck of which tiles you draw. You have to read the board, you have to read your opponents, you have to know how and when to buy and sell stocks in hotels, and which hotels to merge, which opponents to undercut, which pieces to put on the board that will really screw up how your opponents are trying to do their thing. And that is Acquire. And let's pick one more game and we'll call that a wrap. So for this last one, I'm actually going to pick Charterstone, which this is, from all the games I went over, this is the lowest lasting game in my collection. Meaning the point of the series is to pick games that have lasted, to pick games that have been around for a minimum of 6 months, hopefully at least a year, because I want to pick games that weren't just a flash in the pan, oh I really love that, but then 3 months later it's on my, trading video where I'm getting rid of it. And Charterstone is the newest game on my list, but I feel confident picking this one because it's a legacy game that we finished, and that's good enough for me. I mean, honestly, if I played it last week and finished it, that would be good enough for me to pick this one because it has enough staying power that I finished the darn thing. So Charterstone is a Stonemaier game. It's a legacy game, and it was thoroughly enjoyable. Now, if you've read my blogs, if you've watched my videos, you know that I don't love Stonemaier games the way the rest of the world seems to. I think they are all good. I've recently gotten Wingspan back to give it another shot and see if it sticks this time. But while I think they are all good, none of them have pulled me in the way they seem to pull in the rest. And Charterstone is actually one of my favorite, in not in how good a game it is, but in being good at what it tries to do, and there's a difference. So for instance, take Wingspan for example. For myself, I just like Everdell more. It's not that Wingspan is bad, not in the slightest, a great game, I just preferred Everdell. Versus Charterstone, within what it's trying to do, I thought it did it very well, meaning I want a game to be best in class for what it's trying to do. Otherwise, I'll just play another game that's best in class in that category. And so Charterstone, while I think is significantly worse than Wingspan, was better for our group in the purpose that it served. Now, Charterstone is a legacy game with adorable art, absolutely adorable art, but it's a legacy game in which we finished it pretty quickly, and it was fun. It was possibly what I'd recommend. I don't know. I think Pandemic Legacy is still what I'd recommend as a first-time legacy game, just because of how many boxes it checks off, and especially because it's cooperative, and so that means that you don't have to worry as much about messing up the rules in a way that screws up with one opponent versus the other. But in Charterstone, it's basically a worker placement game where you are building your city, you're building your field of different elements on the board. Now, I actually like Rise of Queensdale better, but I think Charterstone is more accessible, and the artwork is certainly better in Charterstone. The overall package is better in Charterstone, but I think Queensdale is technically better. But anyways, in Charterstone, over multiple games, you're going to be building up your charter. You're going to be improving the buildings you have on the board, unlocking crates, getting new workers, getting new leaders in your clan or your area or whatever it is, and slowly but surely building up an engine that allows you to, hopefully, well, have the best engine, to be able to manipulate the board and to constantly pivot your strategy based on the new things that come up, based on the new stuff that show up game to game. Now, very little of what Charterstone does was incredible. Unlike Pandemic Legacy or unlike some other legacy games, there were no moments in the game where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. But it was fun, it was simple, it was appealing, it was accessible, and overall, and I will say, I think it had the best endgame scoring from any legacy game I've played. One of the problems with legacy games is, like, how do you justify who won? Like, is it the person who won more throughout the game? Does it really just come down to the last game? That's the only thing that matters. Charterstone really has an eloquent scoring system that you can also manipulate things throughout the game. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. But Charterstone had the best endgame scoring that I saw from any legacy game, where it actually felt like it made sense. It didn't feel like it didn't feel off. It didn't feel like it was a cheat versus the last game versus the earlier game. I really enjoyed Charterstone. It is still on my shelf because I think at some point I will get the recharge pack and play it again with my daughter. The artwork was accessible, it was endearing, the play was pretty light. The engines built that you're going to build throughout the game get more complex, but the actual gameplay is pretty light and accessible. And that is Charterstone. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is another insight into my collection. I'll be doing one of these every now and again because, I mean, at the end of the day, while I have a lot of games, my collection rotates so much that picking games that have stuck around, there's only so many videos I can actually do before I start running out. In any case, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from BoardGameCo. Thank you for being here. Thanks for sticking around through just what games I like and all that kind of stuff. And it's always a joy to talk to you and just talk about games. I'm a sucker for the hobby. In any case, once again, I am Alex from BoardGameCo. You can subscribe down below, ring the bell for notifications, like, comment, tell me which of the games I talked about is your favorite, or if none of them are, tell me which ones you didn't like and why. I'd love to know. I love the conversation. And until next time, have a good one.